Jasmine Carter's $12,000 first-class ticket meant nothing when flight attendant Brenda Miller ordered her to economy. "We need to verify your ticket again," she sneered. As security approached, Jasmine noticed the airline CEO's familiar face, watching everything from across the cabin. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever witnessed discrimination in the travel industry. You won't believe how this flight attendant's racist actions come back to haunt her in the most unexpected way. Jasmine Carter woke up to the panoramic view of Manhattan from her penthouse apartment. At 28, she had accomplished more than most people twice her age. The morning sunlight glinted off her Harvard Business School diploma hanging prominently on the wall alongside numerous achievement awards. As the daughter of tech mogul William Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Innovations, Jasmine had grown up with privilege, but she had never relied solely on her father's name to get ahead. She slid out of bed and began her morning routine, mentally preparing for what might be the most important day of her career. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Good luck today, sweetheart. You're going to change the industry." Jasmine smiled. Despite running a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, William Carter always made time to support his daughter. He had been her rock since her mother died when Jasmine was 12, teaching her the value of hard work, integrity, and using privilege to create opportunities for others. After a quick shower, Jasmine dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit that complemented her deep brown skin. She studied her reflection in the mirror, adjusting her natural curls into a neat updo. Looking professional was essential today. The presentation she would deliver in San Francisco tomorrow could revolutionize opportunities for underrepresented communities in the tech world. For the past 2 years, Jasmine had been running the Diversity and Inclusion division of Carter Innovations. While some whispered that she only got the position because of her father, those who worked with her knew better. Under her leadership, the division had developed groundbreaking recruitment and retention strategies that had increased diversity at the company by 43%. Now she was taking things a step further with a bold new initiative that would create pathways to tech careers for thousands of young people from marginalized communities. As she applied her makeup, Jasmine's phone rang again. This time it was Marcus, her boyfriend of 8 months. "Hey babe, just wanted to wish you good luck before your flight," Marcus said. "Thanks. I'm a little nervous about the presentation, but I think they're going to love the proposal," Jasmine replied. "Of course they will. Just remember what I always tell you," Marcus said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Your daddy's money and Harvard degree won't shield you from everything out there. Stay alert." Jasmine sighed. Marcus, a community organizer from Harlem, often reminded her that her privilege couldn't protect her from racism. They had argued about it more than once. While she acknowledged her advantages, Jasmine had experienced plenty of discrimination despite her family's wealth and her impressive credentials. "I know, Marcus. I've got to finish getting ready. I'll call you when I land." After ending the call, Jasmine checked her travel details one more time. She had splurged on a $12,000 first-class ticket for the 6-hour flight to San Francisco. The comfortable seat would allow her to finalize her presentation without distractions, and she could arrive well-rested for tomorrow's meeting. She had even coordinated with the airline to ensure her special meal request was noted, and that she would have extra workspace. Her driver texted that he was waiting downstairs. Jasmine gathered her designer luggage, triple-checked that she had her presentation materials backed up in multiple places, and headed down to the waiting town car. The drive to JFK International Airport was smooth, with her driver expertly navigating Manhattan traffic. Jasmine used the time to review her notes one last time. The presentation proposed a partnership between Carter Innovations and 5 major tech companies to create a comprehensive education and recruitment pipeline for underrepresented communities. It would require a significant investment, but the potential impact was enormous. When they arrived at the airport, Jasmine breezed through the priority check-in line. The attendant at the counter smiled broadly when she saw Jasmine's first-class ticket. "Good morning, Ms. Carter. We're delighted to have you flying with us today. I've noted your meal preference and arranged for some extra workspace as requested. Is there anything else we can do to make your journey more comfortable?" "No, that's perfect. Thank you," Jasmine replied, appreciating the courteous service. After navigating security with the efficiency afforded to first-class passengers, Jasmine spent some time in the exclusive lounge, enjoying a light breakfast while answering emails. When it was time to board, she was among the first group called. As she walked down the jet bridge, Jasmine mentally prepared for 6 hours of productivity. The business class cabin was half full when she entered, mostly with older white men in expensive suits. A few of them looked up as she passed, their expressions ranging from indifference to subtle surprise at seeing a young black woman in the premium cabin. A flight attendant named Michael greeted her warmly at the door. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Carter. Let me show you to your seat." As Michael led her to her seat, Jasmine noticed another flight attendant watching her from the galley. The woman, whose name tag read Brenda Miller, had thinning blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and deep frown lines around her mouth. When their eyes met, Brenda quickly looked away, but not before Jasmine caught a flash of something that looked distinctly like disapproval. Jasmine brushed it off as she settled into her spacious seat. This wasn't the first time she'd received looks like that, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Today was too important to let someone else's prejudice affect her mood. What she didn't realize was that Brenda Miller would soon turn what should have been a routine flight into a humiliating nightmare that would change both their lives forever. Jasmine nestled into the plush leather seat, immediately appreciating the ample legroom and privacy of first class. She stowed her designer carry-on in the overhead bin and placed her laptop bag under the seat in front of her. After getting settled, she took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to relax before the long flight ahead. Michael, the friendly flight attendant who had welcomed her aboard, approached with a warm smile. "Can I offer you a pre-flight beverage, Ms. Carter? Perhaps some champagne?" "That would be lovely, thank you," Jasmine replied, returning his smile. As Michael moved to the galley to prepare her drink, Jasmine noticed Brenda Miller serving other first-class passengers. The older flight attendant was all smiles as she chatted with an elderly white couple across the aisle, asking about their destination and offering extra pillows for comfort. When Brenda turned and saw Jasmine watching, her smile vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped expression. Michael returned with a flute of champagne. "Here you are, Miss Carter. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it," Jasmine said, taking the glass. As the first-class cabin filled, Jasmine sipped her champagne and reviewed her presentation notes on her tablet. A distinguished-looking older gentleman with salt and pepper hair took the seat across the aisle from her. He nodded politely in her direction before settling in with a newspaper. The boarding process continued, and Jasmine noticed Brenda repeatedly passing by her seat, never once asking if she needed anything while continuing to attend to other passengers. When Jasmine pressed her call button to request a glass of water, Brenda appeared to deliberately ignore it until Michael finally responded several minutes later. "I apologize for the wait, Ms. Carter," he said, looking uncomfortable. "What can I get for you?" "Just some water, please," Jasmine replied. Michael returned with her water. Brenda intercepted him in the aisle. "I'll take that," she said curtly, taking the glass from his hand. Brenda approached Jasmine's seat with a cold expression. As she extended the glass, her hand slipped, spilling water down the front of Jasmine's designer suit. "Oh my," Brenda said, her voice lacking any genuine concern. "How clumsy of me." Jasmine gasped as the cold water soaked through her clothes. "Excuse me? Accidents happen," Brenda replied with a shrug, not offering any napkins or assistance to clean up the spill. The gentleman across the aisle looked up from his newspaper, his eyebrows raised at the scene unfolding before him. "I'll get you some napkins," he offered, reaching for his own supply. "That won't be necessary," Brenda interjected sharply. "I'll handle it." She returned a moment later with a single cocktail napkin, barely adequate for the large spill. Jasmine accepted it with a tight smile, trying to maintain her composure despite the obvious slight. As the final preparations for takeoff were made, Jasmine noticed Brenda whispering to another flight attendant while glancing in her direction. The other attendant looked uncomfortable and quickly busied herself with other tasks, but Brenda continued to watch Jasmine with undisguised suspicion. Once they were airborne and the seatbelt sign turned off, Jasmine headed to the lavatory to try to dry her suit jacket. When she returned to her seat, she found Brenda standing there, examining her ticket and personal items. "Excuse me," Jasmine said, her voice firm. "What are you doing with my belongings?" Brenda looked up, not the least bit embarrassed at being caught. "Just making sure everything is in order. We've had some issues with passengers being in the wrong section lately. I assure you, I'm in the correct seat," Jasmine replied, her patience wearing thin. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Brenda asked, her tone suggesting it wasn't really a request. Jasmine reached into her purse and produced her boarding pass, which clearly showed her assigned first-class seat. Brenda examined it with exaggerated scrutiny. "There seems to be a problem with your ticket," Brenda announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "The system is showing a different assignment." "That's impossible," Jasmine countered. "I checked in without any issues, and the gate agent confirmed my seat." "Nevertheless," Brenda insisted, "there appears to be a discrepancy. I'll need to verify this with the system." By now, several other passengers were watching the exchange with interest. Jasmine felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. "I'd like to speak with the lead flight attendant," Jasmine requested, maintaining her composure despite the public humiliation. "I am the senior flight attendant on this service," Brenda replied with a smug smile. "And I'm telling you there's an issue with your ticket." Jasmine pulled out her phone. "Then I'd like to document this interaction. I find it strange that I'm the only passenger whose ticket needs verification mid-flight." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Recording is not permitted during flight for security reasons. Put your phone away immediately or I'll be forced to report you to the captain." Jasmine reluctantly lowered her phone but stood her ground. "This is unacceptable. I purchased a first-class ticket, checked in properly, and was welcomed aboard by your colleague. There is no legitimate reason to question my presence here now." "Are you suggesting I have some other motive?" Brenda asked, her voice dripping with false innocence. "I'm suggesting that you're singling me out when I've done nothing wrong," Jasmine replied steadily. Brenda's fake smile vanished. "I need to check the manifest again. In the meantime, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings." "For what purpose?" Jasmine demanded. "We need to relocate you until this matter is resolved," Brenda stated. "I'm not moving from my assigned seat," Jasmine insisted. Brenda's expression hardened. "Then I'll need to call security." The older gentleman across the aisle folded his newspaper and leaned forward. "Excuse me," he began, but Brenda cut him off with a raised hand. "This doesn't concern you, sir," she said sharply, before walking to the front of the cabin and picking up the aircraft phone. Moments later, two male flight attendants approached Jasmine's seat. One of them was Michael, who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. "Ms. Carter," the other man said quietly, "I'm the purser on this flight. I understand there's an issue with your seating assignment." "There's no issue," Jasmine replied firmly. "This flight attendant is creating a problem where none exists." The purser glanced at Brenda, who was watching from the galley with her arms crossed. "Nevertheless, to avoid any further disruption, we'd appreciate if you could temporarily relocate while we sort this out." "This is discrimination," Jasmine stated clearly. "I'm being singled out because of my race." Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The older gentleman across the aisle was now watching intently, his expression unreadable. "That's a serious accusation," the purser replied, lowering his voice further. "Please, let's handle this discreetly." "I've been discreet," Jasmine countered. "I've been patient and cooperative, despite being treated with suspicion and hostility from the moment I boarded." Brenda stepped forward. "If you continue to be disruptive, we'll have no choice but to involve the air marshal." Faced with the threat of further escalation and potential legal complications, Jasmine realized she had little choice in the immediate situation. With as much dignity as she could muster, she gathered her belongings. As security approached to escort her from first class, Jasmine caught the eye of the older gentleman across the aisle. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a flash of recognition in his gaze, but then security was beside her, and she was being led through the cabin toward economy class, aware of dozens of curious eyes following her journey of humiliation. What Jasmine didn't know was that this mortifying walk would soon set in motion a chain of events that would transform not just her life, but an entire industry. The economy section of the plane felt like another world compared to the spacious luxury of first class. Jasmine was directed to a middle seat in row 37, sandwiched between a heavy-set man who had already claimed the armrest and a teenage girl with headphones blasting music loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Excuse me," Jasmine said as she squeezed past the man in the aisle seat, who sighed dramatically before standing up to let her in. As she settled into the cramped middle seat, Jasmine felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. The man beside her gave her a curious look. "Downgrade?" he asked, eyeing her expensive suit. Jasmine forced a tight smile but didn't respond. She didn't trust herself to speak without her voice breaking. Instead, she pulled out her phone and tried to connect to the in-flight Wi-Fi to contact customer service. After paying $20 for internet access that barely worked, Jasmine finally managed to reach the airline's customer service chat. She explained the situation in detail, trying to maintain a professional tone despite her anger and embarrassment. The response was frustratingly generic. "We apologize for any inconvenience. A customer service representative will contact you after your flight. Is there anything else we can assist you with today?" Jasmine typed back, "Yes, I want to speak with someone immediately about being forcibly removed from my paid first class seat without cause. I understand your frustration. Unfortunately, all of our representatives are currently assisting other customers. Your estimated wait time is approximately 65 minutes. Have you ever been discriminated against while traveling? Comment number 1 if you've ever been unfairly treated because of how you look, or comment number 2 if you've witnessed someone else being discriminated against. Hit that like button if you believe airlines need to do better with their diversity training." This story is about to take an unexpected turn that you won't see coming, but first, how would you have reacted in Jasmine's situation? Sighing in frustration, Jasmine put her phone away and tried to make the best of the situation. She needed to focus on her presentation for tomorrow, but her laptop barely fit on the tiny tray table, and her elbows kept bumping into her seatmates whenever she tried to type. The man beside her glanced at her screen. "Big meeting?" he asked, seemingly oblivious to her desire for privacy. "Yes," Jasmine replied curtly, angling her screen away from him. Every few minutes, passengers from first class would walk past, on their way to the lavatory. Several of them gave Jasmine curious looks, clearly recognizing her from the earlier confrontation. One older white woman even had the audacity to whisper something to her husband while pointing in Jasmine's direction, making no attempt to be discreet. After about 45 minutes of struggling to work in the uncomfortable conditions, Jasmine felt a tap on her shoulder from across the aisle. She turned to see an older gentleman with kind eyes offering her a bottle of water. "Thought you might be thirsty," he said. "I noticed they haven't started the beverage service back here yet." Jasmine recognized him as the man who had been seated across from her in first class. "Thank you," she said, accepting the water gratefully. "That's very kind." "Eric Thompson," he introduced himself with a nod. "I couldn't help but notice what happened up front. Completely unacceptable." "Jasmine Carter," she replied. And yes, it was. "I've seen this sort of thing before," Eric said quietly. "Never ceases to amaze me how people can behave." There was something in his tone that made Jasmine look at him more closely. He wasn't just being polite. He seemed genuinely disturbed by what he had witnessed. "Have you flown this airline often?" Jasmine asked. "You could say that," Eric replied, with a small smile. He pulled out a small notebook and jotted something down. "I fly several times a week." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the beverage cart. Brenda was pushing it down the aisle, still wearing that artificial smile for every passenger except Jasmine, whom she completely ignored when taking drink orders. "Excuse me," Jasmine said firmly when Brenda attempted to skip past her. "I'd like a ginger ale, please." Brenda's smile tightened. "We're out," she said without checking. "I can see several cans right there," Jasmine pointed out. With obvious reluctance, Brenda grabbed a can and practically threw it at Jasmine, not bothering to provide a cup or napkin. The can was warm. Eric Thompson observed this interaction with narrowed eyes. making another note in his little book. As the flight continued, Jasmine found herself replaying other instances of discrimination she'd faced throughout her life. There was the time a boutique salesperson had followed her around the store, clearly suspecting her of shoplifting despite her expensive clothes and accessories. Or the countless times she'd been mistaken for support staff rather than an executive at business functions. Or how real estate agents would suddenly claim properties were no longer available when she arrived for viewings. Each time, people around her had dismissed her concerns. Even her father sometimes suggested she might be overreacting or misinterpreting situations. Marcus was the only one who truly understood, never questioning her experiences or suggesting she was being too sensitive. "It wears you down, doesn't it?" Eric said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Jasmine looked at him, surprised by his insight. "What does?" "Death by 1,000 cuts," he replied. "All those little indignities. People who haven't experienced it don't understand how exhausting it is." Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had posted a partial video of her confrontation with Brenda on social media, and it was already gathering comments. Most were supportive, expressing outrage at her treatment, but there were also plenty suggesting she must have done something to deserve it, or questioning why she was making such a big deal about being moved to economy. Jasmine put her phone away, feeling a fresh wave of humiliation. Now the incident would follow her online, potentially affecting her professional reputation just before her big presentation. As she tried to refocus on her work, Jasmine noticed Eric Thompson was watching Brenda carefully as she moved through the cabin. He seemed to be paying particular attention to how she interacted with different passengers, making notes after each observation. There was something methodical about his behavior that struck Jasmine as unusual for a regular passenger. Looking more closely at him, she felt a nagging sense of familiarity. Where had she seen his face before? He wasn't a celebrity, at least not in the conventional sense, but there was something about him that suggested importance. A memory stirred in the back of her mind. A business magazine her father had been reading last month. There had been an article about reclusive CEOs who avoided publicity despite running major companies. One of the featured executives had been... Jasmine's eyes widened as realization dawned. Could it be? Was Eric Thompson actually Richard Thompson, the CEO of Aurora Airlines, the very company whose plane they were currently flying on? If so, why was he in economy class taking notes? And more importantly, what might this mean for Brenda Miller and her blatant discrimination? 2 hours into the flight, Jasmine could no longer ignore her suspicions about Eric Thompson. His methodical note-taking, his strategic positioning in economy after initially being seated in first class, and his keen interest in the flight attendants' behavior all pointed to someone conducting some kind of evaluation. The more she studied his face, the more certain she became that he was indeed Richard Thompson, the reclusive CEO of Aurora Airlines. Thompson excused himself to use the lavatory, and Jasmine decided this might be her only opportunity to confirm her suspicions. She waited a minute before following, hoping to catch him in the more private area near the galleys. As she approached the lavatory area, she heard Brenda Miller's voice coming from behind the curtain that separated the galley from the passenger cabin. She was speaking to another flight attendant in hushed but clearly audible tones. "Did you see her face when security moved her? Priceless. These people always act so entitled when they get a taste of luxury. I don't care how expensive her clothes are, she didn't belong up there. First class has standards." "Brenda, that's enough," the other flight attendant whispered urgently. "You're going to get yourself in trouble one of these days." "Please," Brenda scoffed. "I've been doing this for 26 years. I know which passengers matter and which don't. Trust me, no one important is going to care about her complaints." Jasmine froze, her heart pounding with anger and hurt. The naked racism, in Brenda's words, left no room for interpretation or excuse. She was so absorbed in what she had just heard that she didn't notice Eric Thompson standing behind her until he cleared his throat softly. She turned, embarrassed to be caught eavesdropping, but Thompson's expression was one of grim understanding, rather than judgment. He motioned for her to follow him to a slightly more private area near the emergency exit row, which was currently unoccupied. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "I believe we should talk." Jasmine took a deep breath. You're Richard Thompson, aren't you? CEO of Aurora Airlines. A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he nodded. I am, though I prefer to travel as Eric when I'm conducting these observations. You were in first class earlier, Jasmine noted. You moved to economy deliberately. Thompson nodded again. I regularly travel on my own airline incognito to observe operations firsthand. I was planning to spend half the flight in first class and half in economy, as I usually do. But after witnessing how you were treated, I decided to follow and observe more closely. So this is some kind of undercover boss situation? Jasmine asked. Something like that, Thompson confirmed. What happened to you was completely unacceptable, Ms. Carter. I've been documenting similar incidents across our routes for the past 6 months as part of a larger evaluation of our customer service practices. And what have you found? Jasmine asked, although she could guess the answer. Thompson's expression darkened. More problems than I'd like to admit. Inconsistent service quality is one thing, but the patterns of discrimination I've observed are deeply troubling. Your experience today is unfortunately not an isolated incident. Jasmine felt a complex mix of emotions, validation that her experience was being taken seriously by someone in a position of power, but also disappointment that such discrimination was apparently common enough to warrant an undercover investigation. What are you going to do about it? She asked directly. Immediate action for starters, Thompson replied. But I'm also working on systemic changes that will address the root causes, rather than just treating symptoms. Would you be willing to share more details about your experience today? It would be valuable for my assessment. Jasmine hesitated only briefly before recounting the full sequence of events, from Brenda's initial cold treatment to the deliberate water spill, the public questioning of her ticket, and finally the humiliating relocation to economy. Thompson listened intently, occasionally making notes but mostly maintaining eye contact and nodding in understanding. Thank you for sharing that, he said when she finished. I know it can be exhausting to have to explain these experiences, especially when they're still fresh. Before Jasmine could respond, they were interrupted by a flight attendant, not Brenda, but the purser who had been involved in removing Jasmine from first class. Sir, is everything all right? He asked, clearly concerned about the extended conversation happening in the exit row area. Thompson straightened up. Everything is fine. I was just having an interesting conversation with Ms. Carter here. The purser looked confused, glancing between them with uncertainty. I'd like a word with you in private, Thompson said to him, his tone shifting subtly to one of authority. And please ask Ms. Miller to join us. The purser's eyes widened with sudden recognition. Mr. Thompson, I didn't realize. Of course, sir. Right away. As the purser hurried off, Thompson turned back to Jasmine. I apologize, but I need to handle this situation immediately. Please return to your seat for now. I promise this matter will be addressed before we land. Jasmine made her way back to her seat, her mind racing. What exactly was Thompson planning to do? Would there be actual consequences for Brenda? Or would this be another case of empty corporate promises? From her seat, she could see the purser whispering urgently to Brenda near the forward galley. Brenda's expression shifted from annoyance to shock as she glanced toward economy class. The color drained from her face when the purser continued speaking, presumably revealing Thompson's identity. A few minutes later, Brenda was called to the rear galley where Thompson was waiting. Through the gap in the curtain, Jasmine could see their interaction. Thompson's expression was stern as he spoke, while Brenda's body language transformed from defensive to increasingly distressed. At one point, she appeared to be making excuses, gesturing animatedly, but Thompson just shook his head firmly. When Brenda emerged from the galley 20 minutes later, her eyes were red and her hands were shaking. She avoided looking at any passengers as she made her way to the forward cabin, disappearing behind the first-class curtain. The chief flight attendant appeared shortly afterward, making his way directly to Jasmine's seat. He leaned down to speak quietly. Ms. Carter, Mr. Thompson has asked that you join him in first class for the remainder of the flight. If you'll gather your belongings, I'll escort you back to your original seat. The passengers around Jasmine stared with undisguised curiosity as she collected her things. The man beside her, who had been largely indifferent to her discomfort earlier, now looked at her with new interest, clearly wondering about her sudden change in status. As Jasmine followed the chief attendant back to first class, she caught sight of Eric Thompson already seated in his original spot across the aisle from her assigned seat. He gave her a small nod as she approached. What had seemed like a nightmare was transforming into something entirely different. Jasmine couldn't help but wonder what revelations the remainder of the flight might bring and what consequences awaited Brenda Miller when they landed in San Francisco. Jasmine settled back into her first-class seat with a complex mixture of emotions. While vindication coursed through her veins, the humiliation she had endured still stung sharply. The chief flight attendant hovered nearby, his demeanor completely transformed from earlier. "Ms. Carter, please accept our most sincere apologies for the inexcusable treatment you experienced," he said, his voice low but earnest. "Mr. Thompson has instructed us to ensure your absolute comfort for the remainder of the flight. Is there anything at all we can get for you?" "Thank you," Jasmine replied evenly. "A fresh glass of water would be nice." She intentionally requested the same beverage that Brenda had spilled on her earlier. "Of course, right away," the attendant said, hurrying off to fulfill her request. Around her, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin had noticeably shifted. Passengers who had witnessed her earlier removal now studiously avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in their books or the view outside their windows. A few, however, gave her small smiles or nods of acknowledgement, perhaps trying to distance themselves from what had happened. Michael, the friendly flight attendant from earlier, approached with her water, served properly on a tray with a linen napkin. "It's good to have you back, Miss Carter," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, not all of us." He trailed off, glancing nervously toward the galley. "I understand," Jasmine assured him. "Thank you, Michael." Across the aisle, Eric, or rather, Richard Thompson, watched this interaction with interest. Once Michael departed, Thompson turned to her. "I owe you an apology as well, Ms. Carter," he said. "What happened today occurred on my airline, under my leadership. The responsibility ultimately lies with me." Jasmine appreciated his directness. "Where's Ms. Miller now?" she asked. "She's been reassigned to inventory duties for the remainder of the flight," Thompson replied. "Further action will be taken upon landing." "Will she be fired?" Jasmine asked, surprised by her own ambivalence about the question. Just an hour ago, she would have unequivocally wanted Brenda terminated. Thompson considered the question carefully. "That would be the easy solution, wouldn't it? Remove the problem employee and declare the issue resolved." He leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "But I've learned that firing individuals rarely solves institutional problems. What happened to you today is a symptom of something much deeper." Jasmine nodded, impressed by his perspective. "Most executives would just want to contain the PR damage." Thompson smiled slightly. "I'm not most executives, and frankly, I'm tired of the superficial approach to these issues that pervades our industry." The flight attendant served lunch, and Jasmine was pleased to find that her special meal request had magically been found after all. As she ate, Thompson continued their conversation, revealing more about himself and his unusual approach to running Aurora Airlines. "My father started this airline with 2 planes back in 1978, he explained. He was a pilot who believed air travel should be accessible to everyone, regardless of background. When I took over 15 years ago, I promised to maintain that vision." "And has that been challenging?" Jasmine asked. Thompson chuckled. "Immensely. The airline industry isn't exactly known for its progressive values." As they talked, Jasmine realized that Thompson was speaking with a depth of understanding about discrimination that seemed personal rather than theoretical. She studied his features more carefully, his light olive complexion, the texture of his salt and pepper hair. "You mentioned earlier that death by 1,000 cuts wears you down," she said carefully. "You sounded like you were speaking from experience." Thompson nodded, a wry smile playing at his lips. "Perceptive of you." Yes, I know something about navigating spaces where you're viewed as an outsider. He paused, considering how much to share. My mother was black, my father was white. I present as white to most people, which has given me a unique perspective on how differently people behave when they don't know my heritage. Passing, Jasmine said, understanding immediately. Not intentionally, Thompson clarified. But the effect is the same. I've sat in boardrooms where executives made casually racist remarks, assuming everyone present shared their worldview. I've witnessed the double standards and microaggressions, sometimes directed at me once my background became known, more often directed at colleagues of color while people looked to me for complicity. That must be difficult to navigate, Jasmine observed. It is, but it's also been instructive, Thompson replied. It's shown me how pervasive these issues are, even in supposedly progressive companies. That's partly why I started these undercover evaluations, to see our operation through the eyes of our customers, especially those who don't fit the traditional first-class passenger profile. Their conversation was interrupted by turbulence, requiring all passengers to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. When the air smoothed out again, Thompson changed the subject, asking about Jasmine's work at Carter Innovations. My father mentioned your diversity initiative last month at a business roundtable, he said. It sounds impressive. Surprised that her work had reached Thompson's radar, Jasmine outlined her program to create new pathways into tech for underrepresented communities. Thompson listened attentively, asking insightful questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than polite conversation. That's exactly the kind of innovative approach we need more of, he said when she finished. Too many diversity programs are just window dressing, photos in the annual report with no substantial change. As their conversation continued, Jasmine found herself impressed by Thompson's genuine commitment to addressing systemic issues. Unlike many executives who approach diversity as a PR exercise, he seemed to understand the complex interplay of policy, culture, and accountability required to create real change. When the captain announced they were beginning their descent into San Francisco, Thompson handed Jasmine his business card. I'd like to continue this conversation, Ms. Carter. Not just about today's incident, but about your work as well. I think there might be an opportunity for collaboration that could benefit us both. Jasmine accepted the card, noting it had his direct number handwritten on the back. I'd like that, she replied honestly. As the plane began its approach to San Francisco International Airport, Jasmine reflected on the dramatic turn the day had taken. What had begun as a humiliating example of the racism she had faced throughout her life had transformed into a potentially significant professional connection. Yet even as she felt a sense of resolution about the immediate situation, Jasmine couldn't help wondering what would happen next. Would Brenda face real consequences? Would Thompson's interest in addressing systemic issues translate into meaningful action? And how would this experience affect her presentation tomorrow? The plane touched down smoothly, and as passengers prepared to disembark, Thompson leaned across the aisle one last time. I meant what I said about continuing our conversation. Ms. Carter, in fact, if you're available this evening, I'd like to invite you to dinner to discuss a proposition I have in mind. A proposition? Jasmine asked, intrigued. Yes, Thompson replied with a small smile. I think what happened today, unfortunate as it was, might present an opportunity to create some meaningful change. 7 o'clock at Luciano's if you're interested. I've taken the liberty of making a reservation. As Jasmine gathered her belongings and prepared to exit the plane, she noticed Brenda standing rigidly by the forward galley, her expression a mixture of fear and resentment. Their eyes met briefly, and Jasmine was surprised to feel pity alongside her lingering anger. Whatever happened next, she sensed that this flight had changed the trajectory of multiple lives. Hers, Brenda's, and perhaps even the future of Aurora Airlines itself. The moment Jasmine stepped off the jet bridge into San Francisco International Airport, she was greeted by the distinctive click and flash of cameras. For a disorienting second, she thought they might be paparazzi there for her. Perhaps the video of the incident had gone even more viral than she realized. Then she spotted Richard Thompson emerging from the plane behind her, and understood. A small cluster of photographers called out to the airline CEO, who raised a hand in acknowledgement, but didn't stop to engage with them. As the cameras continued to flash, Jasmine realized she was inadvertently being caught in the shots with Thompson, a fact that would likely fuel speculation online once the photos were published. "I apologize for the photographers," Thompson said quietly as they walked together toward baggage claim. "I try to maintain a low profile, but the business press always seems to track my movements." "It's fine," Jasmine assured him, though she was already thinking about the potential implications of being photographed with the CEO immediately after the incident on the plane. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she resisted the urge to check it right away. "My driver can take you to your hotel," Thompson offered. "It's the least we can do after today's experience." "Thank you, but I've already arranged transportation," Jasmine replied. After what had happened, she was feeling a particular need to maintain her independence. Thompson nodded in understanding. "Then I'll see you at 7. Luciano's is on Montgomery Street. Just give your name to the host." They parted ways at the terminal exit, Thompson toward a waiting black sedan and Jasmine toward the taxi stand. Only when she was settled in the back of a taxi did she finally check her phone. The screen was flooded with notifications. Multiple missed calls from her father, several text messages from Marcus, and dozens of alerts from social media and news apps. Apparently, the partial video of her confrontation with Brenda had indeed gone viral, with various news outlets now picking up the story under headlines like "Black Executive Removed from First Class in Latest Airline Discrimination Incident." Did that flight attendant deserve to lose her job? Comment number 1 if you think she should be fired immediately, or comment number 2 if you believe in second chances. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself in a public place. Keep watching to find out what happened when Jasmine came face to face with the woman who humiliated her. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there? You look like you just got some bad news." "I'm fine," Jasmine replied automatically, though her mind was racing. She had been so focused on her upcoming presentation that she hadn't fully considered how quickly this incident might spread online or how it might affect her professional reputation. When she arrived at her hotel, the sleek lobby of the Four Seasons offered a momentary respite from the chaos. As she checked in, the receptionist gave no indication of recognizing her, treating her with the polished courtesy the luxury hotel was known for. Once in her room, Jasmine placed her luggage in the closet and sat on the edge of the king-size bed, finally allowing herself to process the emotional roller coaster of the day. She kicked off her heels and began returning calls, starting with her father. William Carter answered on the first ring. "Jasmine, are you all right? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I'm fine, Dad," she assured him, touched by the concern in his voice. "My phone was in airplane mode until we landed. How did you hear about what happened?" "It's all over the internet, sweetheart. One of my assistants saw the video and brought it to my attention immediately. I was about to call the airline's executive office when I saw you hadn't responded to my messages." Jasmine gave him a condensed version of events, including her surprising encounter with Richard Thompson. William listened without interrupting, though she could practically hear him thinking through the implications. "Thompson is a good man," he said when she finished. "Keeps a low profile, but he's well respected in the industry. If he's taking a personal interest in this situation, that's significant. He invited me to dinner tonight to discuss some kind of proposition," Jasmine told him. "Interesting," William replied. "This could turn into a valuable connection, Jasmine. Thompson has substantial influence beyond just his airline." After promising to call her father again after the dinner, Jasmine ended the call and turned to the numerous messages from Marcus. His texts had evolved from concerned, "Just saw a video online, is that you? Call me," to increasingly agitated, "Why aren't you responding? Are you okay?" to a final message that made her wince. "This is exactly what I've been telling you about. Privilege not protecting you." Rather than respond by text, she called him directly. "Finally," Marcus answered, his voice tense. "I've been worried sick." "I'm sorry," Jasmine said. "It's been a crazy day, and I couldn't check my phone during the flight." "I told you this would happen," Marcus said, skipping past her apology. "I've been warning you that your money and education won't shield you from racism. And now you've experienced it firsthand in front of an audience. His "I told you so" attitude grated on her already frayed nerves. Marcus, I've never claimed to be immune to racism. I've shared plenty of experiences with you before. Not like this, he countered. This time you can't dismiss it or rationalize it away. This time it's on video for everyone to see. I've never dismissed or rationalized racism, Jasmine replied, her voice rising despite her effort to stay calm. Just because I don't approach it the same way you do doesn't mean I'm in denial. You work within a system that's designed to exclude people like us, Marcus argued. You try to change things from the inside, but today, you saw how quickly that system will turn on you the moment you don't fit someone's idea of where you belong. What had started as a check-in call was rapidly devolving into the same argument they'd had many times before. Marcus was passionate about his community organizing work and often criticized Jasmine's corporate approach to social change as too incremental and compromising. I understand you're concerned, Jasmine said, trying to de-escalate. But right now I need support, not a lecture about my life choices. I am supporting you, Marcus insisted. I'm trying to help you see the reality of the situation. No, you're using what happened to me today to reinforce your own worldview, Jasmine replied sharply. That's not support, Marcus. That's exploitation. The silence that followed was heavy with tension. I need to go, Jasmine finally said. I have to prepare for my presentation tomorrow and a dinner meeting tonight. Dinner meeting? With who? Marcus asked, suspicion evident in his tone. The CEO of the airline. He wants to discuss what happened and some potential collaboration. Marcus scoffed. Of course. They're in damage control mode now that it's gone viral. They'll wine and dine you, make some empty promises about sensitivity training, maybe offer you free flights, anything to keep you from suing them or continuing to talk about it publicly. That's not the impression I got from him, Jasmine defended. And I'm capable of recognizing when I'm being manipulated. Are you? Marcus challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're being played. The conversation ended on that sour note, with both of them too frustrated to find common ground. After hanging up, Jasmine tossed her phone onto the bed and headed for the shower, hoping the hot water would wash away some of the day's tension. As she let the water cascade over her, Jasmine's thoughts turned to her upcoming dinner with Thompson. What exactly did he want to propose? Was Marcus right about this being merely a damage control exercise? She didn't think so, but she would need to approach the meeting with clear eyes. After her shower, Jasmine checked social media and found that, as expected, the incident had exploded online. The partial video had millions of views across platforms, and her name was trending in several categories. Opinion was divided, with many expressing outrage on her behalf, while others questioned why she was making such a big deal about being moved to economy, or suggested there must be more to the story. What troubled her most were the comments speculating about her personally, questioning her credentials, her character, even her right to be in first class in the first place. The incident itself had been humiliating, but having it dissected by strangers online added another layer of violation. As she dressed for dinner, selecting a different suit since her original one had been stained with water, Jasmine's phone rang again. This time it was her assistant at Carter Innovations, calling to inform her that several journalists had reached out requesting comments about the airplane incident. What should I tell them? The assistant asked. No comment at this time, Jasmine decided. And please let the communications team know I don't want any statements issued without my direct approval. With her hair freshly styled and her makeup reapplied, Jasmine gathered her purse and hotel key. Despite the emotional drain of the day, she was determined to approach her dinner with Thompson with the same professionalism and strategic thinking she brought to all business engagements. As she rode the elevator down to the lobby, she couldn't help but wonder what new surprises the evening might bring. The day had already contained enough twists to last a lifetime, yet somehow she sensed that the most significant developments were yet to come. Stepping into the warm San Francisco evening, Jasmine hailed a taxi to Luciano's, mentally preparing herself for whatever proposition Richard Thompson had in mind. Luciano's exuded old-world elegance with its polished mahogany paneling and soft amber lighting. The host, a distinguished older gentleman in an immaculate suit, greeted Jasmine warmly. "Ms. Carter, welcome. Mr. Thompson is already seated and expecting you. Please follow me." As she followed the host through the restaurant, Jasmine noticed several diners giving her curious glances. She wondered if they recognized her from the viral video or if they were simply noting her presence as a well-dressed black woman in the exclusive establishment. The host led her to a private alcove toward the back of the restaurant, where Richard Thompson was seated at a table for three. Jasmine's steps faltered slightly when she realized someone else was already at the table with him, Brenda Miller. The flight attendant looked dramatically different from earlier that day. Her uniform had been replaced by a conservative navy blue dress, her tight bun had been loosened into a more flattering style, and her expression was one of acute discomfort, rather than the smug superiority she had displayed on the plane. Thompson rose as Jasmine approached. "Ms. Carter, thank you for coming. I hope you don't mind, but I've asked Ms. Miller to join us for the first part of our conversation." Jasmine maintained her composure, though her heart was racing. "I admit I'm surprised," she said carefully. "Please, sit down," Thompson gestured to the empty chair. "I believe in addressing issues directly whenever possible." The tension at the table was palpable as Jasmine took her seat. Brenda couldn't seem to meet her eyes, instead staring fixedly at the untouched water glass in front of her. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white with strain. "Ms. Miller has something she would like to say to you," Thompson prompted gently but firmly. Brenda finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Ms. Carter," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to apologize for my behavior on today's flight. My actions were unprofessional, disrespectful, and..." She hesitated, swallowing hard before continuing. "Racist. There is no excuse for how I treated you." The apology sounded rehearsed, but not entirely insincere. Jasmine could see genuine distress in the woman's expression, though whether it stemmed from remorse or fear for her job remained unclear. "I appreciate your apology," Jasmine responded neutrally, not yet ready to offer forgiveness. "Ms. Miller understands that her actions today have serious consequences," Thompson interjected. "However, before we discuss those, I wanted to provide some context that, while not excusing her behavior, might help explain it." Brenda shifted uncomfortably in her seat as Thompson continued. "For the past 6 months, I've been conducting an internal investigation into discrimination complaints at Aurora Airlines. What you experienced today, Ms. Carter, was unfortunately not an isolated incident. We've received numerous reports of similar treatment from passengers of color, particularly in our premium cabins." Thompson paused as a waiter approached to take their drink orders. After the waiter departed, he continued in a lower voice. "Most corporations would handle this situation by immediately terminating Ms. Miller, issuing a public apology, and perhaps making a donation to a relevant nonprofit organization. The problem would be considered solved, at least from a public relations perspective." "But not from a systemic one," Jasmine observed. "Exactly," Thompson nodded appreciatively. "Firing individual employees doesn't address the underlying culture that allows such behavior to flourish. It's treating the symptom rather than the disease." Brenda's eyes darted between them, clearly surprised by the direction of the conversation. "Ms. Miller," Thompson addressed her directly, "would you share with Ms. Carter what you told me earlier about your training when you joined Aurora 26 years ago?" Brenda cleared her throat nervously. "When I started as a flight attendant in 1998, part of our unofficial training included profiling passengers who might be out of place in first class. We were taught to watch for people who might have used fraudulent means to obtain premium tickets or upgrades." She paused, visibly uncomfortable. The criteria we were given, while never explicitly stated in those terms, clearly targeted passengers of color and those who didn't fit a certain image of wealth and status. "And this unofficial training continued even after official policies changed?" Jasmine asked. Brenda nodded. "It was passed down from senior attendants to new hires. Many of us never questioned it because it was presented as protecting the airline. and legitimate passengers. Thompson leaned forward. What happened to you today, Ms. Carter, is the result of decades of institutional practices that were racist in effect, if not always in intent. Firing Ms. Miller would address one individual's actions, but would do nothing to dismantle the system that shaped those actions. The waiter returned with their drinks and took their dinner orders. Once he had gone, Jasmine took a sip of her wine, considering Thompson's words carefully. "So if you're not firing Ms. Miller, what exactly are you proposing?" she asked. "That's where you come in," Thompson replied. "Instead of the usual damage control approach, I want to use this incident as a catalyst for genuine transformation. At Aurora Airlines, I'd like to engage you, Ms. Carter, to develop a comprehensive anti-racism training program for our entire staff, from flight attendants to executives." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, surprised by the scope of his proposal. "That's a significant undertaking." "It is," Thompson agreed. "And it needs to be more than just sensitivity training or unconscious bias workshops. We need a program that addresses the systemic issues within our company culture and provides concrete tools for change." "And my role in this would be?" "I'd like to bring you on as a consultant, with full authority to review our policies, interview staff at all levels, and develop a training program that could become a model for the industry," Thompson explained. "Your background in diversity and inclusion at Carter Innovations makes you uniquely qualified, and your first-hand experience today gives you insight no outside consultant could match." Jasmine took another sip of her wine, considering the proposition. Part of her was intrigued by the opportunity to create meaningful change at an institutional level, but another part was wary of being used as a token or having her traumatic experience exploited for corporate PR. "And what about Ms. Miller?" she asked, glancing at the flight attendant who had remained silent throughout this exchange. Thompson turned to Brenda. "Why don't you tell Ms. Carter what we discussed?" Brenda straightened in her chair. "Mr. Thompson has offered me a choice. I can accept termination for my actions today, or I can commit to being part of the solution. If I choose the latter, I would be placed on probation and required to participate fully in developing and implementing the new training program." Jasmine's surprise must have shown on her face because Thompson quickly added, "The easy path would be to fire Ms. Miller and make a public example of her. The harder but ultimately more productive approach is to harness her 26 years of experience to help us understand exactly how these discriminatory practices have persisted despite official policies against them." The waiter arrived with their meals, creating a momentary pause in the conversation. As they began to eat, Jasmine considered Thompson's unusual approach. It was certainly not the typical corporate response to a PR crisis, and she had to admit, it showed a more sophisticated understanding of systemic racism than she was accustomed to seeing from executives. "What about the public aspect of this?" Jasmine asked after a few bites. "The video is already viral. People are demanding accountability." "We'll be transparent about our approach," Thompson assured her. "I'm prepared to face criticism for not taking the more obvious punitive action. But I believe once people understand the comprehensive nature of what we're trying to accomplish, most will support it." Jasmine turned to Brenda, who had barely touched her food. "And you? Do you actually want to be part of this, or are you just trying to save your job?" Brenda met Jasmine's gaze directly for the first time. "I won't pretend my initial reaction wasn't fear of losing my livelihood," she admitted. "But sitting in Mr. Thompson's office this afternoon, being forced to watch the video of how I treated you and really see my behavior from an outside perspective," she paused, her voice catching. "It made me confront aspects of myself I've never wanted to acknowledge. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Ms. Carter, but I am asking for the opportunity to be part of making sure no one else experiences what you did today." The raw honesty in Brenda's response caught Jasmine off guard. She had expected defensiveness or a superficial apology, not this apparent willingness to engage in genuine self-reflection. "I have a suggestion," Jasmine said after a moment of consideration. "If I agree to develop this training program, I want Ms. Miller to work directly with me as part of the development team, not just as a participant but as an active contributor who can provide insight into the informal culture among flight attendants." Brenda looked startled by the proposal. Thompson raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That would certainly be unconventional," he noted. Exactly, Jasmine replied. If we're serious about moving beyond token gestures and creating real change, we need to be willing to take unconventional approaches. Ms. Miller's direct involvement would demonstrate that this isn't just about punishing individuals, but about transforming the entire system. Thompson nodded slowly, considering the idea. I think that could be extremely powerful. Ms. Miller, would you be willing to work directly with Ms. Carter in this capacity? Brenda looked genuinely stunned. You would want to work with me? After what I did? I'm not suggesting we'll become friends, Jasmine clarified. But your perspective as someone who has both perpetuated and now recognized these discriminatory practices could be invaluable to developing an effective program. As the implications of this proposal sank in, Jasmine found herself reconsidering her original business trip purpose. The presentation she had come to San Francisco to deliver suddenly seemed less significant compared to the opportunity Thompson was offering, a chance to create systemic change in an entire industry rather than just one company. There's one more thing, Thompson said, seeming to read her thoughts. I understand you're here to present a diversity initiative to several tech companies tomorrow. I'd be interested in hearing about that as well, as it might complement what we're trying to achieve at Aurora. The conversation continued through dessert, with Thompson excusing Brenda after they had outlined the basic framework of their collaboration. Once Brenda had left, Thompson and Jasmine delved deeper into the details of the proposed consulting arrangement, including compensation, timeline, and deliverables. By the time they parted ways outside the restaurant, Jasmine had agreed in principle to Thompson's proposition, pending formal contract details to be worked out in the coming days. As her taxi pulled away from the curb, she gazed out at the San Francisco skyline, reflecting on the extraordinary turn her business trip had taken. What had begun as a humiliating incident of discrimination had somehow transformed into an unexpected opportunity to drive meaningful change. The question now was whether this promising beginning could translate into genuine transformation, or if it would ultimately become just another corporate diversity initiative that failed to address the root causes of systemic racism. Jasmine woke the next morning to the insistent ping of her phone. Groggily reaching for it on the nightstand, she was shocked to find over 300 notifications had accumulated overnight. The incident video had exploded beyond social media into mainstream news coverage, with her name and face appearing across national outlets. Black executive humiliated in first-class cabin, screamed one headline. Aurora Airlines faces racism allegations, declared another. There were already calls for boycotts of the airline, and hashtags like Flying While Black and Boycott Aurora were trending nationwide. As Jasmine scrolled through the deluge of messages, a breaking news alert popped up on her screen. Aurora Airlines CEO Richard Thompson to hold press conference addressing viral discrimination incident. Before she could process this development, her phone rang with a call from Thompson himself. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," he said, his voice tense. "I apologize for calling so early, but I wanted to speak with you before you heard from other sources. The situation has escalated." "I'm seeing that," Jasmine replied, sitting up in bed. "What's this about a press conference?" "It's scheduled for 3 o'clock today. I'd like you to participate if you're willing," Thompson said. "We need to get ahead of this narrative before it spirals completely out of control." "What's happened beyond the video going viral?" Jasmine asked, sensing there was more. Thompson sighed heavily. "Several things. First, our stock has dropped 11% in pre-market trading. Second, we've identified at least 3 similar incidents from the past year that passengers are now coming forward about, inspired by your experience. And third," he paused, "both Ms. Miller and you have received threats." "Threats," Jasmine repeated, a chill running through her. "Our security team is monitoring the situation, and I've arranged for private security for both of you. The threats appear to be coming from both sides, those angry at Ms. Miller for her actions and others who are—" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, upset about a black woman in first class receiving attention and support. Jasmine felt a sickening twist in her stomach but wasn't surprised. She had seen the hateful comments online. "There's more," Thompson continued. Several members of my board are pressuring me to take immediate action by terminating Ms. Miller as a scapegoat. They're concerned about shareholder value and want to contain the PR damage with a swift, decisive response. I thought we agreed. That wouldn't address the systemic issues, Jasmine said. We did, and I stand by that. But I need your help to make the case publicly for our more nuanced approach. Many people, including some within our company, are looking for a simple villain and victim narrative with a clean resolution. After agreeing to meet Thompson before the press conference to prepare, Jasmine ended the call and immediately checked her email. As Thompson had warned, there were several disturbing messages among the hundreds that had arrived overnight. Some contained explicit racial slurs and threats, while others accused her of exaggerating the incident for attention or financial gain. Her phone rang again, this time with her father's name on the screen. "Jasmine, I've been trying to reach you," William Carter said, foregoing any greeting. "This situation is exploding and I'm concerned about your safety and reputation." "I'm fine, Dad," she assured him, though the threats had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. "I've seen some of the coverage. It's getting ugly," he said. "I think you should consider coming home immediately. Let Aurora's PR team handle this while their legal department works out a settlement." "A settlement?" Jasmine repeated. "Dad, I'm not looking to sue them. In fact, I've agreed to work with Thompson on developing an anti-racism training program for the airline." Silence met her revelation, followed by a disbelieving chuckle. "You can't be serious, sweetheart. After the way they treated you, this company needs to be held accountable, not given free diversity consulting." "It's not free, and it's not just consulting," Jasmine countered, explaining the comprehensive nature of what Thompson had proposed. As she outlined the plan, including Brenda's direct involvement, she could practically hear her father's skepticism growing. "Jasmine, I understand you want to make a difference, but this sounds like Thompson is using you to clean up his PR mess while avoiding any real consequences for his company." "That's not what this is," she insisted. "He's taking a risk by not following the typical corporate playbook of fire, apologize, and move on. He genuinely wants to address the root causes." "And you believe him?" William asked doubtfully. "Yes, I do," Jasmine replied, realizing as she said it that she truly did trust Thompson's sincerity, despite having just met him. Her father sighed. "Well, you've always had good judgment. Just promise me you'll be careful and that you'll consult with our legal team before signing anything." After assuring him she would, Jasmine ended the call and headed for the shower, needing to prepare for her originally scheduled presentation that afternoon, which now conflicted with Thompson's press conference. She would have to rearrange her plans. As she dressed, her phone rang yet again. This time it was Marcus, and his tone was even less supportive than her father's. "I just saw Thompson's statement about the press conference," he said without preamble. "Tell me you're not actually participating in this corporate whitewashing exercise." "Good morning to you too," Jasmine replied dryly. "And it's not whitewashing. We're taking a restorative justice approach rather than a punitive one," Marcus scoffed. "Restorative justice? That's what we call it now when corporations avoid accountability. That flight attendant publicly humiliated you because of your race. She should be fired, at minimum." "Firing her doesn't solve the underlying problem," Jasmine argued. "It just removes one symptom while the disease continues to spread. So you're going to work with her? The woman who treated you like garbage?" Marcus sounded incredulous. "Some of my colleagues are organizing a protest outside Aurora's headquarters this afternoon. They're demanding systemic change, not just a training program." "That's exactly what we're trying to create," Jasmine countered, growing frustrated. "Systemic change requires more than just firing individuals or making public statements. It requires deep, sustained work within the organization." "And you think Aurora Airlines is genuinely committed to that work?" Marcus asked skeptically. "Or is Thompson just using you as a shield, the black woman who forgives them so everyone else should too?" His words stung because they echoed doubts that had flickered through her own mind. Was she being naive in trusting Thompson's intentions? Was she allowing herself to be used as a token? "I need to go," she said, not wanting to continue the argument. "I have meetings to rearrange before the press conference." Just think about whose interest you're really serving here, Marcus said before hanging up. Throughout the morning, the situation continued to escalate. Jasmine's assistant called to inform her that all the tech companies she had been scheduled to present to were aware of the incident, and that several had expressed interest in postponing to a later date when the media attention had died down. They're worried about being associated with controversy, her assistant explained apologetically. Around noon, Jasmine received another call from Thompson. His voice was tense as he informed her that someone had leaked Brenda Miller's home address online and that she had received death threats against her children. She's completely distraught, Thompson said. I've moved her family to a secure location for now, but this is getting out of hand. That's terrible, Jasmine said sincerely, horrified that children were being threatened. There's more, Thompson continued grimly. Some of my more conservative board members are now suggesting that you might have provoked the incident or are exaggerating for financial gain. They're looking for ways to discredit you if you pursue legal action. Jasmine felt a surge of anger. That's absurd. There's video evidence of what happened. I know, and I've shut down that line of discussion firmly, Thompson assured her. But it illustrates the defensive mentality we're up against. People are retreating to their corners, looking for simple narratives that confirm their existing beliefs. By the time Jasmine arrived at Aurora Airlines headquarters for the pre-press conference meeting, the scene outside the building confirmed the growing polarization. A crowd of protesters had gathered, some holding signs condemning the airline for racism, others defending Brenda and claiming the incident was being blown out of proportion. Security escorted Jasmine through a side entrance to avoid the crowd. In a conference room upstairs, she found Thompson looking exhausted, surrounded by PR executives and legal counsel who were arguing about message strategy. Ms. Carter, thank you for coming, Thompson said, dismissing the others to speak with her privately. As you can see, this has become much larger than either of us anticipated. Are you reconsidering our approach? Jasmine asked directly. Thompson ran a hand through his silver hair. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't feeling the pressure to take the easier path, fire Ms. Miller, issue a formal apology, announce a large donation to an appropriate nonprofit, and wait for the news cycle to move on. But? Jasmine prompted. But that would be surrendering to expediency over principle, Thompson replied. I meant what I said yesterday about wanting to create real change, not just the appearance of it. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. An assistant entered, looking anxious. Mr. Thompson, I have Ms. Miller on the line. She's threatening to resign and make a public statement of her own. She says she can't handle the threats against her family and wants to take full responsibility to end this. Thompson and Jasmine exchanged concerned looks. If Brenda resigned and made her own statement, it could undermine their entire approach and further inflame the situation. Put her through to this phone, Thompson instructed. When the call connected, they could hear Brenda crying on the other end of the line. Ms. Miller, this is Richard Thompson. I have Ms. Carter with me. We understand you're considering resignation. I can't do this, Brenda sobbed. My children are terrified. My neighbors are getting harassed. It's not worth it. Ms. Miller, Jasmine interjected gently. I understand you're frightened, and I'm truly sorry your family is being threatened. That's completely unacceptable, regardless of what happened between us. Why are you even talking to me, Brenda? Asked, bewildered through her tears. You should hate me. This isn't about personal feelings, Jasmine replied carefully. It's about finding a path forward that creates meaningful change rather than just more pain and division. There was silence on the line as Brenda seemed to absorb these words. The press conference is in an hour, Thompson added. We were planning to announce our collaborative approach to addressing what happened, but if you feel you can't participate in that plan, we'll respect your decision. After another moment of silence, Brenda spoke again, her voice steadier. What exactly would you be announcing? Thompson outlined their planned statement, emphasizing the commitment to systemic change rather than just punitive measures. As he spoke, Jasmine could hear Brenda's breathing calming. You'd still want me involved, even with all this backlash? Brenda asked. disbelief evident in her voice. Especially with all this backlash, Jasmine replied. It underscores exactly why. A more nuanced approach is necessary. Real change doesn't come from simply punishing individuals. It comes from transforming systems and cultures. By the time they ended the call, Brenda had agreed to continue with the plan, though she would not be attending the press conference in person due to security concerns. As the hour of the press conference approached, Jasmine received messages from several of her colleagues at Carter Innovations, expressing concern about her involvement with Aurora Airlines. Some thought she was being too lenient, while others worried about the impact on her professional reputation. Even those who understood her reasoning cautioned that public opinion might not be as nuanced as her approach. The final blow came just 30 minutes before the press conference, when Jasmine received a call from her father again. "Jasmine, I've just heard from the organizers of tomorrow's tech presentation. They're postponing indefinitely," William Carter said gravely. They're concerned that the controversy might overshadow the initiative itself. The news hit hard. Jasmine had spent months developing the proposal that had brought her to San Francisco in the first place. Now it was being shelved because of an incident that had nothing to do with her work. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," her father continued. "But maybe this is a sign you should step back from this Aurora situation. Come home, let things cool down, and we'll reschedule the presentations when this has blown over." For a moment, Jasmine was tempted. The backlash was more intense than she had anticipated, affecting not just her personal safety, but her professional goals as well. Walking away would certainly be easier. But as she stood in Thompson's office, watching the growing crowd of protesters and media outside the building on a security monitor, she realized that the easy path wasn't always the right one. Sometimes the most important work happened in the midst of the storm, not after it had passed. "Dad, I can't walk away from this," she said finally. "What happened on that plane isn't just about me. It's about a pattern that affects countless people every day. I have an opportunity to help create real change, and I need to see it through." After ending the call with her father, Jasmine took a moment to center herself. She reviewed her notes for the press conference, consulted with Thompson one last time on messaging, and prepared to face the media storm head-on. As they walked toward the conference room where dozens of journalists waited, Thompson paused, turning to Jasmine with a serious expression. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we step through those doors, there's no turning back. The easy solutions will be off the table." Jasmine nodded, determination replacing her earlier doubts. "I'm certain. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight gets messy." Together they pushed open the doors and stepped into the glare of camera lights, ready to propose a path forward that many wouldn't understand or accept, but that offered the possibility of genuine transformation rather than merely symbolic action. The press conference room buzzed with tension as Jasmine and Richard Thompson took their places behind the podium. Camera flashes created a strobe-like effect, and the murmur of journalists speculating about what was to come created a low, persistent hum in the background. Brenda Miller's absence was conspicuous, though a chair had been placed for her at the table. Thompson leaned toward the microphone, his expression grave yet determined. "Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you're aware, yesterday on Aurora Airlines Flight 372 from New York to San Francisco, an incident occurred that has since gained significant attention across social media and news outlets." The room fell silent as Thompson continued. "What happened to Ms. Jasmine Carter was unacceptable. She experienced discrimination based on her race while flying in our first-class cabin. For that, Aurora Airlines takes full responsibility." Cameras clicked frantically as journalists captured his unequivocal acknowledgement of racial discrimination, a rarity in corporate America, where such admissions were typically avoided due to liability concerns. The easy response would be to terminate the employee involved, issue a public apology, make a donation to an appropriate cause, and consider the matter resolved. That is what many have called for, and what many companies would do. Thompson paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Today, we are choosing a different path. Not the easy one, but the one we believe will create meaningful, lasting change." He turned slightly toward Jasmine, inviting her to speak. As she leaned toward the microphone, Jasmine was acutely aware that her words would be scrutinized by millions. She had prepared extensively, but still felt the weight of the moment. "My name is Jasmine Carter," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Yesterday, I experienced something that unfortunately is all too familiar to many people of color, being treated as if I didn't belong in a space I had every right to occupy." She recounted the events on the plane succinctly, neither downplaying the humiliation she had felt, nor exaggerating for dramatic effect. She simply stated the facts, allowing them to speak for themselves. "In the aftermath of this incident, many have called for punitive measures. I understand that impulse. When we witness injustice, our natural reaction is to demand consequences for those responsible." Jasmine paused, making eye contact with several journalists in the front row. "But I've spent my career working on diversity and inclusion initiatives, and I've learned that lasting change rarely comes from punishment alone." A murmur rippled through the crowd as she continued. "Today, I'm announcing that I will be working directly with Aurora Airlines to develop and implement a comprehensive anti-racism program that addresses the systemic issues underlying incidents like the one I experienced." Thompson returned to the microphone to outline the specifics of the initiative: a top-to-bottom review of company policies and practices, mandatory training for all employees that went beyond superficial diversity workshops, structural changes to hiring, promotion, and evaluation systems, and ongoing monitoring with transparent reporting of progress. Ms. Miller, the flight attendant involved in yesterday's incident, will be directly involved in this process, Thompson added, causing another stir among the journalists. "Rather than simply terminating her employment, we are requiring her participation in developing solutions that address the root causes of discriminatory behavior." The announcement was met with a barrage of questions, many skeptical or outright hostile. Why wasn't the employee being fired? Was this just a PR strategy to avoid legal liability? How could the victim of discrimination be expected to work with the person who had discriminated against her? Jasmine addressed these challenges directly. "I understand the skepticism. In our culture, we've been conditioned to view punishment as the primary form of accountability. But transformative justice offers another path, one that seeks to repair harm while also transforming the conditions that allowed that harm to occur." She spoke passionately about the limitations of purely punitive approaches, explaining how they often failed to create lasting change because they focused on individuals rather than systems. Firing Ms. Miller might satisfy calls for immediate justice, but it wouldn't prevent the next incident. It wouldn't address the informal culture that has perpetuated these behaviors for decades. It wouldn't help us understand how to truly transform our institutions. A reporter from a major news network pressed further. "Ms. Carter, many people in the Black community feel you're letting Aurora Airlines off the hook. How do you respond to accusations that you're being used as a token to help the company avoid more serious consequences?" The question was blunt, voicing concerns similar to those Marcus had raised. Jasmine took a moment before responding thoughtfully. "I understand those concerns, and I take them seriously. But I reject the notion that pursuing transformative change is somehow letting anyone off the hook. In many ways, what we're proposing is far more demanding than simply firing one employee and moving on." She leaned forward slightly, her voice intensifying. "We're requiring Aurora Airlines to commit to a years-long process of examination and transformation. We're demanding that they not just acknowledge this single incident, but recognize and address patterns of discrimination throughout their organization. That's not letting them off the hook, it's holding them to a higher standard of accountability." Thompson nodded in agreement before adding, "Ms. Carter is not being paid to be a spokesperson or to defend Aurora Airlines. She has been engaged as an independent consultant with full authority to evaluate our practices and recommend changes, no matter how uncomfortable or challenging those might be for our organization." As the press conference continued, Jasmine was struck by the polarized reactions in the room. Some journalists seemed genuinely intrigued by the unconventional approach, while others remained deeply skeptical. It reflected the broader public response she had seen online. People tended to either embrace the complexity of transformative justice or dismiss it as corporate manipulation. The final question came from a veteran journalist known for his incisive reporting on corporate ethics. Mr. Thompson, Ms. Carter, what metrics will you use to determine if this approach is successful? How will the public know if this is truly creating change rather than just serving as elaborate reputation management? Thompson deferred to Jasmine, who appreciated the substantive nature of the question after so many focused on optics rather than outcomes. We'll be establishing clear, measurable benchmarks for success, she explained. These will include quantitative metrics like changes in diversity at all levels of the organization, reduction in customer complaints related to discrimination, and employee satisfaction across demographic groups. But they'll also include qualitative assessments of company culture and passenger experiences, she continued. Most importantly, we commit to transparency. Regular public reports will detail our progress, including areas where we're falling short. This isn't a one-time initiative or a temporary response to a PR crisis. It's the beginning of a fundamental transformation in how Aurora Airlines approaches issues of race and inclusion. As the press conference concluded, Jasmine felt emotionally drained but oddly energized. The path ahead would be challenging, but she believed in the approach they were taking. Whether the public and her peers would come to share that belief remained to be seen. In the 6 months that followed, Jasmine divided her time between Carter Innovations and her consulting work with Aurora Airlines. The early days were difficult, especially working directly with Brenda Miller, who initially vacillated between defensive withdrawal and overwrought apologies. Their first working session had been particularly tense, with Brenda struggling to articulate the unwritten rules and practices she had absorbed throughout her career without sounding overtly racist. Jasmine had to repeatedly assure her that the goal wasn't to shame her, but to understand how discriminatory behaviors became normalized within the company culture. I never thought of myself as racist, Brenda admitted during one particularly breakthrough session. I just thought I was good at spotting people who didn't belong in first class. And what did not belonging look like to you? Jasmine had pressed gently. Brenda's uncomfortable response, focusing primarily on appearance, speech patterns, and other coded characteristics, had revealed volumes about the implicit biases embedded in the airline's informal culture. The public reaction to their approach remained divided. Some praised the airline for taking a more substantive approach to addressing racism, rather than simply engaging in performative damage control. Others continued to criticize Jasmine for collaborating with the company, suggesting she had been co-opted or was prioritizing corporate interests over racial justice. Marcus had remained skeptical, though their relationship had gradually repaired as he saw Jasmine's unwavering commitment to creating meaningful change rather than just accepting corporate platitudes. He had even contributed valuable perspective as Jasmine developed training modules addressing how systemic racism manifested in customer service interactions. Thompson had faced his own challenges, with several board members continuing to question his approach and shareholders expressing concern about the resources being devoted to the initiative. But as the first quarterly report showed promising changes in employee awareness and customer feedback, the criticism began to subside. The most significant validation came from unexpected quarters. Other airlines, recognizing the positive attention Aurora was receiving for its substantive approach, began reaching out to inquire about implementing similar programs. What had begun as a response to a single incident was evolving into an industry-wide conversation about race, customer service, and corporate responsibility. 6 months to the day after the incident, Jasmine found herself boarding another Aurora Airlines flight. This time, she was immediately recognized by a young black flight attendant named Tiana, who discreetly thanked her as she settled into her first-class seat. "What you and Mr. Thompson did changed everything for us," Tiana whispered. "I've wanted to be a flight attendant since I was a little girl, but I was always afraid of how I'd be treated. Your story inspired me to finally apply, and the new training program made me feel like I could actually belong here." As the plane prepared for takeoff, Jasmine reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with that humiliating walk to economy class 6 months earlier. The work was far from complete. Transforming deeply entrenched attitudes and practices was a long-term project, not a quick fix. There had been setbacks and frustrations alongside the progress. But moments like this, Seeing tangible evidence that their efforts were creating space for people like Tiana to pursue their dreams without fear of discrimination confirmed that they had chosen the right path, however difficult. Sometimes, transformative justice required looking beyond punishment to imagine a more equitable future, and then doing the hard work of building it, one policy, one conversation, one mind at a time. As the plane accelerated down the runway and lifted into the sky, Jasmine felt a sense of hope that mirrored their ascent, challenging gravity, but possible with sustained, deliberate effort and the courage to chart a new course. This story teaches us that confronting racism requires more than just punishing individuals. It demands transforming entire systems. Jasmine could have easily sought revenge or a settlement, but she chose a harder path that created lasting change. Her journey shows that true leadership often means rejecting simple solutions in favor of complex, uncomfortable work. We learn that privilege doesn't shield anyone completely from discrimination, but it does provide resources to fight back. Jasmine used her position and education not just to defend herself, but to create opportunities for others who might not have her advantages. The story reminds us that people are more than their worst moments. Brenda's transformation wasn't immediate or perfect, but it demonstrates how confronting our biases can lead to genuine growth. Meaningful change happens when we're willing to have difficult conversations and examine uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our institutions. Perhaps most importantly, we see that justice comes in many forms. Sometimes the most powerful response to harm isn't punishment, but creating a world where that harm becomes less likely to occur again. This requires patience, courage, and the vision to imagine a better future even in the midst of pain and anger. What would you have done in Jasmine's position? Would you have chosen the path of transformative justice, or would you have demanded more immediate consequences? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming discrimination and creating positive change. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of hope and transformation. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember that real change happens when brave individuals choose the harder, right over the easier wrong.